Welcome to your weekly astrology forecast. This is for the week of April 13th. So I will pull up the chart while people are joining live, and just want to let you know that I'm happy to have you here, whether you're watching this live or watching the replay. It's nice to connect with you, and leave me a comment. Let me know where you're tuning in from. So I know that we're going to be speaking about Sun-Pluto situation this week. Sun-Pluto is happening. And then also we'll be speaking about some Jupiter and some Mercury-Mars as well. We are in the waning phase of the lunar cycle, so that's important to consider as well. So we'll speak about that too. Hi, Justin. All right, cool. So how are you doing today? How are you doing this week? Let me know. And we'll start in maybe just a minute or so, so that people can join the live and so that we can all interact together. And if anyone knows how to do that thing where you can timestamp where I start talking, where there's like a timestamp, if you can do that I'll tell you when I'm going to start actually officially talking about the transits. That would be great. Doing good. Yeah, things are crazy right now, right? Okay. Get us all set here. So this will be a bit of a more casual talk, less structured than my norm. And I hope to answer some questions for you as well. Bored during the quarantine. Yeah, you know, it's funny. Everyone's experience is so different, right? So I know a lot of people, I talked to family the other day and they were like, oh my gosh, I'm so bored. I actually am not bored, fortunately, unfortunately, because I just have a ton of stuff going on between client work and finishing my classes and all of that good stuff. So it's been, yeah, quite interesting. All right, cool. So I'm gonna see if I can. Okay, cool. Now I can see the live chat. All right, that's sweet. Inanna's doing good. Let's see. Okay. Justin is asking about Venus retrograde. I will do a separate video about that because that is worthy of its whole entire own topic. All right, let's jump into the transits of the week. So the main player that I really want to talk about is we are having Sun square Pluto this week. So this is a major transit, the way that I see it at least, because Pluto in a square to any personal planet is going to bring up issues around power, around authority, around shifting and changing things that at a very deep level, it can often have a sort of cathartic effect. And Pluto making an aspect, or the Sun making an aspect to Pluto, this is a symbol of the Sun, which is our will, our ego, this thing inside of you that says, I want to move forward, I want to initiate, I want to bring something, I want to do something. So the Sun can also be seen as the energy that animates you. Some astrologers relate it to the soul as well. And so when we have the Sun, which is about will and also sort of like your own personal identity, how you identify, when that comes into contact with Pluto, there is a transformation, Pluto, around how it is that you show up, how it is that you move into the world, and how it is that you exercise your state of will. When I see Sun Pluto in a person's birth chart, This is typically a person who is constantly transforming their sense of self. There can be a lot of work around how they feel powerful, how they use their resources. Are they using their power? Are they like remembering that they're powerful? So I think that may come up this week as well, is remembering that you are powerful, and remembering that I think Pluto also brings up questions around why we're powerful and how, or how we feel powerless, or how we feel like we maybe don't have all of the resources that we would like at our disposal. And I find that people that have Sun Pluto in their natal chart, they're constantly working with this question of how am I powerful? Is someone else exerting their power over me? And when someone has Pluto Sun transit, that can bring up that question at that point in time as well. And so this can look like feeling like maybe in the challenging aspect of the aspect, maybe feeling like you don't have a lot of choices, or you don't have a lot of options, or feeling like things are being done to you. In the case of the quarantine, you know, maybe your options are literally very limited. And I think that we see we see this happening sort of in unison with Saturn Pluto having just happened, the Saturn Pluto conjunction, and that will be going back into play later this year. So I think that limitation of Saturn is there as well. But what's happening with Sun Pluto is it's more about like what is the strength inside of you that is not related to external circumstance. What is your inner strength? What does your inner will have to say about the situation that you're in right now? And what are the resources that you have that are on the inside? When we're talking about, in contrast, Sun Saturn aspects, those are more about that person working with the real world limitations that they have, like time, structure, etc. When we're talking about Sun Pluto, it's a little more subtle. It's more about the way that you respond to situations versus what you actually have in front of you. And a lot of times those things are tied together. But when we're talking about Sun Pluto, it is more about what choices you're making, and how you bring yourself into the world. So I hope some of that makes sense. The other part of this that's happening is the Sun is also making an aspect to Jupiter. So we just had Jupiter conjunct Pluto. I think it was last week or maybe the week before. So Jupiter is about expansion. It's about inclusion. It's about elaborating on things and going big. It's kind of interesting because Pluto is about going deep, going like really deep psychologically. Pluto's about depth psychology. Pluto's also related to, it's the archetype, the symbol of the volcano, of like something very deep, very powerful, sometimes literally like a volcano, like oil. Pluto's also related to oil, or something very deep psychologically. So we have this depth symbol with Pluto, and then we also have this, I'm looking at the chart as I'm speaking to you. We also have this symbol of Jupiter, which is about going wide, so to speak. It's about wanting everything. So this is a very like a high octane transit, the way that I see it. And so we have these outer planet, or these slower moving planets, Jupiter and Pluto, that are about really expanding and elaborating and going deep. It's kind of like the energy this week is about going wide and going deep at the same time. It's kind of like all-encompassing. And it could feel overwhelming. That is coming into contact with the Sun. The Sun is about your ego, your identity, the part of you that says, I want to do this, that I am going to move into something from a place of individuality. But the thing is that Jupiter and Pluto are about collective energies. They're about community. And Pluto is about the inner world. Jupiter is about inclusion, and justice of the people that we're around. And Jupiter is also about thinking about people who are not necessarily in your immediate sphere. It's about thinking about everyone. And so, so what does that mean? I feel like I just said a lot there. How do you apply that to your life now? I think that issues around your personal sense of self, and again, like that Pluto energy of what are your inner resources? How do you want to respond to the situations that you're dealing with versus reacting? I think that Sun Pluto, a reaction can be like wanting to protect what it is that you have and wanting to make sure that you are okay, like at all costs, and not really considering. I mean, if we're talking about, you know, in America, there's a lot of like hoarding of certain items. I think that that is something that's a very like Jupiter Pluto symbol, because Jupiter is like, yeah, like I want everything. It's kind of like going excessive. The shadow side of Jupiter is excessiveness. And so I just want you to notice as I'm speaking, like, where are these things coming up for you? And you can leave me a comment. Let me know if something resonates, or if you want, if you have a specific question about something happening in your life. But it is around, what are you working, how are you working with what it is that you have at your disposal? And whenever I see the sun coming into contact with one of these planets, especially with Pluto, you have more power inside of you than you think that you do. The other part of this equation too, take a sip of coffee and see how I'm doing on time. Okay. The other part of this equation that I like for this week, that I think, you know, is a symbol of success, is that the sun is in the sign of Aries. So we're in the last part of Aries this week, and the sun will actually move into Taurus on Sunday. So the sun in Aries is what's called exalted in planetary condition. And so this means that the sun does very well here, that it is positioned to have a certain sense of strength when it especially when it comes into contact with other planets. Now, Jupiter, in contrast, is in its fall in Capricorn. So this means that Jupiter is not able to do all of its Jupiterian things in the way that we deem as socially acceptable, as far as, you know, so this would be Jupiter things naturally would be being generous and wanting to make sure that everyone's included and everyone feels really good, and wanting to explore more and learn more and to absorb information. This Jupiter in Capricorn, there can be a tendency to go more towards going overboard, being excessive, or wanting to, again, like be more self-focused in an excessive way. And so I just want you to watch out for that. I think that the point that I want to make here is that I think that the sun energy is positioned very well. So I see this week where there's a lot of emphasis on you building up your ego in a healthy way. And I would just, you know, temper that you don't overdo things for yourself this week. So I hope that makes sense. I feel like we've talked enough about that particular aspect. The other piece of this, let's talk about the lunar cycle this week. So we are in the third quarter. So we'll have the last quarter moon at 25 degrees of Capricorn. Oh yeah, so okay, let's look at this. So I thought this was interesting because the last quarter moon is happening in Capricorn. And so this is kind of perfect because it's activating this Sun, Pluto, Sun, Jupiter aspect that we just talked about, because Jupiter and Pluto are in the sign of Capricorn. And the sun is coming in to make an aspect to these planets that are already in aspect. And so when this happens, I find that it brings more energy to the aspect itself. Now, the moon also doesn't do very well in Capricorn. So I feel like I feel like this week emotions may be a bit more challenging. But there's a call here to step up to the plate. There's a call here to to embrace your power and to use your will, Sun, to move through whatever it is that you're experiencing right now. I would say because, and so this is like super close too. So the third quarter moon is happening on Tuesday, the 14th at 3:56 p.m. Pacific time. So it may be on the 15th if you're in Australia. But it's happening regardless of where you are at 25 degrees of Capricorn. And so this is within a degree of Pluto. So Moon Pluto connection is like really deep and intense and very emotionally intense. Moon Pluto, when someone has that in their birth chart, that person is deeply, deeply feeling, and they tend to benefit from working with anything around psychological patterns, with understanding unconscious behavior patterns, with understanding attachment theory, and basically understanding how it is that we work psychologically at an internal basis, and especially understanding situations around stress or trauma, shame and guilt, etc. And so I'm not saying that those feelings necessarily will come up, but it's a possibility that whatever you're already feeling, whatever your emotional tone is, your emotional set point at this time, it may feel more intense, especially Tuesday, especially like Monday, Tuesday, the 13th and the 14th, maybe even the 15th. And I think also the emotional tone is connected into these areas where you are exerting your will, where you're exerting your power, and where you're remembering that you are powerful, that you do have resources, that you do have options. So I hope that makes sense. Let's see. Someone has a question about, I'm a Gemini, will I be in a relationship soon? I don't know. I definitely cannot answer questions like that on this, and I think that, side tangent, if you're asking, can I be in a relationship soon? I don't even need to know astrology to talk to you about that. Like we can, like that's something that I think is dependent on the individual themselves, because you can have all of the most beautiful, fantastic transits, and if you are not in a place personally where you can be in a relationship, or if you're not taking actions to connect with people, then you know that's not going to happen. In contrast, you can have all of the most terrible transits, but if you are in a space where you're open to relationship, then, and you're positioning yourself to accept that, then yeah, of course. I think that I think it takes a lot if someone is in a space to have a relationship. I think it takes a lot for that to not happen, just because we're creatures of community and relationship. Like that's the nature, that's the fabric of our being, is to be in relationship. So but good question. I like it when you guys ask questions, and sometimes it inspires me to go on a side tangent like that. So I like doing that. All right, so let's see. I'm gonna go about maybe 10 more minutes, I think. Maybe not. All right, so that's the lunar cycle. The other piece that I do want to talk about that's a little bit minor, but I think is important, is that Mercury will sextile Mars. So sextile is a minor aspect. It's more about opportunity, like you have an opportunity to do things. And Mercury is about mind, communication. Can also be about youthful people in your life, things like that. Mercury is also associated with marketing, technology, even divination, and anything where something is being exchanged, especially information, but it's also about like goods, commerce, etc. Mars is about action. It's about physical vitality. It's about doing something physically, and the oomph and kind of like fighting, anger, agitation. Those are all Mars themes. I take a sip of coffee. So Mercury being in contact with Mars is about an opportunity sextile around communication, Mercury, and something where it's like there's fire there with Mars. So I wouldn't normally talk about a sextile in these because we only have so much time, and sextiles I find are more like you don't really notice it as much. It's something that you can tap into, but it's not as present as, let's say, a square aspect. But Mars is still sitting very closely with Saturn. So Mars is at about 9 degrees Aquarius. Saturn is at 1 degree Aquarius. It's just moved into that sign. And so I think this is important because we are having this interaction between Mercury, which is about communication, our thoughts, and then Mars, Saturn. So I'm really interested to see how things play out this week. I think that there could be opportunities for you to channel your words, to channel your thoughts. Mars, Saturn is like they're the two malefic, or the two malefic planets. So it's not like a warm and fuzzy kind of feeling, but there's a strength there, especially with Saturn being in its own sign of Aquarius. I use traditional rulership, so I see Aquarius as being ruled by Saturn. And then Mars being there. So it's kind of like, I feel like there's a sense of stamina that can be brought to Mars activities when Mars is with Saturn. And again, you know, this can be challenging because it is more of like a hard or prickly or harsh kind of energy, but it's a sextile between Mercury and these planets. So I think that if there's something that you're working on around communication, or I know that maybe maybe last week or the week before, some people had questions about, you know, how to work creatively with navigating through the fucking cluster of what's happening right now, where a lot of people literally cannot work and they're trying to figure out how to manage just even through the next month. So I think that this week is fantastic for working with the resources that you have, which is that sun, Pluto, and then being creative with it and trying to figure out a way to, like, being kind of like critical planning and critical like working with what it is that you have within the boundaries and coming up with a sort of plan. Because again, Mercury is the mind, it's thought process, it's still in the sign of Aries. So there is this more direct focus with the thoughts. And then that coming into contact with Mars, Saturn, I feel like it gives kind of like a kick in the pants, if that makes sense. Yeah, so I'm gonna look at I think I saw some comments coming up. Let's see. Michael, hi Crystal. Michael says I'm using an online group, wait, hang on. Thanks for being patient with me as I read the comments. We're using times to increase our knowledge on a particular topic of interest. Yeah, okay, so that's totally this, where it's like Mercury, Mars, and Saturn, where there is a focus. And again, like Mercury, Mars, it's kind of like, if we were just looking at Mercury and Mars, it's really quick and it's really fast. And that can, I think, kind of lead to like, or show that where there's situations of agitation. But with Saturn in there, it lends to stamina, to moving through something over a long period of time. Let's see. Crystal says, how would this work with Saturn placed in my 11th house? Okay, so that's an excellent question. So I have kind of like two different answers to that question. Number one, the way that I read charts, that I read personal natal charts, birth charts, is I don't find value in just looking at one particular piece like that, because I think that we need to look at the entire birth chart in order to really give an accurate view of what's happening. Yes, of course, I could do a cookbook of what it means to have Saturn in Aquarius moving through your 11th house at this period in time, and we can look at those symbols. But I find that doesn't do very much. Like for me, it's not enough. And so I feel like it's helpful to look at the chart as a whole. I mean, like what's in your 11th house, what planet rules your 11th house, what's your rising, what's your general temperament, etc., blah, 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 blah. So, but that being said, I think that you could look at, okay, this activity of Mars, Saturn is happening in my 11th house, and Saturn moving into a new sign, a new house, in your birth chart is a major, hi Jennifer, it is a major change. And so I would look at, you know, if you just want to look at the 11th house and you want to meditate on that, I would meditate on 11th house topics around groups, communities, organizations. 11th house is also associated with friends, but it's more like the people that you surround yourself with that have a common goal. So I find it more associated with like colleagues, organizations that you're a member of, if you are involved in community work or anything like that. Yeah, so Saturn moving into that house, there is more of a focus on solidifying the foundations of those topics. Again, I would want to look at the ruler of that house, you know, where is that planet? What aspects is it making? I would want to look at your natal Saturn as well. So I hope that makes sense. If you have a specific question about an area of life, let me know, but I hope that is helpful. Let's see. Ethel says, hi Shawna, it was crazy at the beginning of the week and I'm feeling like it's slowly getting better. Thank you for everything that you do. You're welcome. Thank you. Well, that's good. So I think the last piece that I will put into this, because we're going over time a little bit, is the sun will move into the sign of Taurus on Sunday. And so this, of course, is a shift in the symbolic spotlight of, you know, what it is that we're looking at. And this means that the sun is going to start to make some major aspects over the course of the next month. So Taurus is an earth sign. It is trine to Jupiter and Pluto in Capricorn. The sun will also conjunct Uranus. And so there's lots of other fun stuff that's going to be happening. And I'm excited about the sun moving into a more harmonious aspect with some of these more challenging planets. So we will have the sun square Saturn. We'll talk about that next week. I see that also as a major transit around having a sense of power and autonomy. But what I want to leave you with this week is that this week I feel is about getting closure in the crisis, because we're in that third quarter, that last quarter phase of the moon, and Pluto does show where there are feelings of crisis. And so I want you to know that you are positioned to take advantage of this and to really weather the storm. Like, that's what I feel, is I feel like this is about using what it is that you have to find a sense of stability and a sense of rootedness in what feels very unstable and what very well may be unstable, literally. So I want to leave you with that. Again, I am an astrologer and a counselor, so if you're interested in working with me, you can find out more information on my website, shawnamcgrathastrology.com. And until next week, I'm sending you lots of love and wishing you a wonderful week.